بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين.
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وبعد. What were the objectives of the peace plan when it first started after the end of the Gulf War in 1991 with the Madrid peace talks? The first objective was for them to eliminate the Palestinian jihad, which was referred to as an intifada within the occupied territories. And that is because once the Palestinians were given some sort of state, some sort of governing entity, any uprising would then be considered to be a revolt within that state, which can then be quelled legally. When the Palestinians were in the occupied territories and they rose up against their occupiers, right? Much of world opinion was with the Palestinians. I mean, even non-Muslims felt, well, since they are being occupied and you're being oppressed, you have a right to defend yourself. But once a peace treaty occurred, then they were able to eliminate this Palestinian jihad due to the fact that the Muslims, when they would uprise in the territories, would then become terrorists, would become instigators of trouble and so forth. And this is a major objective because every nation has the right to quell its citizens when they overstep the law. And this hasn't happened indeed. In fact, the intifada has come to an end. And when the Palestinians, as has occurred a number of times since the signing of the Oslo Accords, when they have risen up and have demonstrated, they have found the armies of the Palestinian Authority shooting at them. And likewise, many of the leaders of the Islamic movement in Palestine have been arrested and have been tortured by the Palestinian Authority. Okay. Now, the next, and of course that was the second cause that they wanted to achieve out of this peace process was they sought to strangle the Islamic da'wah and strike at the Islamic movement everywhere, or in the words of Nixon in his book 1999 Victory Without War, to hit the Islamic movement from every Morocco to Indonesia. And this is exactly what has happened since the beginning of the Madrid peace talks. Du'at throughout the Islamic world, especially those du'at who were most forthcoming in attacking the peace process and in explaining the dangers of this, were arrested, as happened with Dr. Safar al-Hawali. Thirdly, they seek to destroy all Arab military might surrounding Israel, even though that military might at this time constitutes no threat to Israel. And you saw that with, of course, in the Gulf War with the Iraqis, the destruction of the Iraqi army, and also subsequently with the continual forays into Iraq to make sure that the Iraqis have no sort of weapons or ability in the future. And it's not because, don't misunderstand me, it's not because the Iraqi army, of course, has an agenda to fight the Jews. They are Ba'athists. The founder of their party was a Christian who was part Jewish, also Michel Aflaq. But the fear is that since these are in the hands of a country which is traditionally a Muslim country, that one day that regime might be removed and an Islamic regime might come over, and so therefore that technical expertise and that weaponry would be in the hands of the Muslims. Fourth, they sought to subjugate the region, the Middle East region, to the Israeli military forces and to enforce American hegemony over the region and prevent the development of any armed forces. And this also has happened de facto. I mean, now American troops can be found throughout the Arabian Peninsula, Saudi Arabia proper, throughout the Gulf states, in Egypt, in Turkey, in the no-fly zones over Iraq. And also, they say during the peace process, once a final settlement will occur, American troops will also be found in the Holy Lands in Palestine to enforce the peace. And also you find the Americans in Jordan at times. So this is also de facto American conquest of this area. Fifth, they sought to alter all the media programs and educational curricula in order to erase anything that might incite enmity towards the Jews. As Shamir said during the Madrid peace talks in 1991, we would like to seek in your countries an end to the poisonous preachings against Israel. And this is exactly what happened in Egypt through the Camp David Accords of 1978, no longer in Egypt would you find, like on state television, the reading of those verses that attacked or that condemned the Jews. I mean, if you look in Egyptian television, what would happen is like they would do like a series on tafsir of the Quran, and so whenever it comes to a passage about the Jews, it would just skip. And then after the peace accords in 1991, the same thing has occurred in Jordan. All references to the enmity to the Jews have been removed. And the same thing was attempted in Kuwait also a couple of years ago, but the Muslim activists and scholars put an end to that, where they removed all references to the Jews also in the educational teachings. This is, of course, one of their aims. Sixthly, they seek to enforce Jewish financial and economic hegemony over the whole region. In other words, through Jewish control through the banks, to have a control over the region. I discussed that in the previous lecture. They seek to conquer the region, or to take over the region with Jewish and Christian teachings. And this occurs through the evangelical missions which are sent now, targeting the Muslim lands. And I guess a couple of years ago I also gave a lecture on the evangelization of the Islamic world, where I showed some of the aims that they try to do, and some of the tactics that they do in trying to spread missionary strategy, trying to spread Christianity in the Islamic world. Eighth, that they seek to embezzle the oil and water riches of the region and utilize them for the Jews and the Americans, and this also has occurred. And they seek to morally corrupt the region, as is the way of the Jews whenever they enter into a land. And this also has occurred through the spread of satellite television in the Islamic land. So these were some of the aims and the objectives. And in many of these aims and objectives, I mean, they have made great strides and steps towards that. And the point has become to the point now that, for instance, you might imagine that recently, in the last 6 months to a year, 2 news items have come out of the Middle East, where a young Muslim has converted to Judaism, and another Muslim in Jordan wanted to name his son Ishaq Rabin after the Israeli leader was killed. And this shows how the teachings are influencing the Muslims on a basic level. These are just common Muslims, and this is part of their aim.